Hello, everyone, and welcome to a kitchen table conversation with the Men and Masculine Folks Network, a program from of men and peacemakers. Together, we are shaping a new meanings of masculinity that are authentic, caring, and thoughtful. These conversations help us see the inherent dignity of those around us and practice collective care, something that's very important that bring responsibility to our others and to do it in a way that acknowledge that we're all human beings who are whole. As you guys know, each month we choose topics that can help men and masculine folks identify our own roles in creating safe, thriving communities. We host two discussions about that month's topic, where the first conversation focused on developing a deeper understanding uh, of the topic, where the first and the issue on hand in this case. And during the second conversation of the month, we talk about the practical and tangible ways that men and masculine folks can work alongside others in community to create the change that we want to see. Remember that these conversations are a way for us to come together, learn new things from different perspectives, as well as demonstrate how we can all have these important conversations with people in our lives.
Yeah, so we are so glad that you are joining us here, whether you're watching this conversation live right now, hey, on Facebook or YouTube, or maybe you're tuning in a little bit later, or maybe you're listening on our brand new podcast platform as well. So we are glad you're here. Thank you, and glad to be connecting with you. So, this month we will be talking about our individual and community values and then how those guide how we engage with others and the world around us. So, very excited to get into this. But before that, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. So, my name is Sean Hayes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I am up in Duluth here at Men as Peacemakers, and I'm the program coordinator for the Don't Buy It project. And I'll pass it off to you, Nick.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, my name is Nick Heck. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a youth support staff with MAP's youth program.
And I'm Felix Martinez. My pronouns are he, him, and él. And I work for Esperanza United as the Engaging Men and Boys Program Specialist. Super excited and ready to start the conversation today. And as Sean mentioned, today we will be having a conversation about the individual and community values that we all hold. And as this is our first conversation of the month, we will focus in our time on learning that and learn it in a way that we all can be ourselves, be genuine, and do it in a fun way. So we'll start with this question, guys. When we were growing up, what was the most important values that were instilled on you when you were growing up? When you're little, you're learning about life. What are some of those important values that were instilled in you?
I can jump in here first. Unless, Nick, are you ready?
I was gonna let you do it first.
Okay.
I'm still thinking about that one.
All right. Yeah, yeah. So let's see. So for me, I think growing up, I've talked about this a little bit, but I grew up in a pretty religious Christian household. And so I would say a lot of the values that I was taught early on, are reflected out of that religion and out of the church. Things like, loving your neighbor, being kind and compassionate, being a helper, or I guess in a church way, like having a servant heart is what we sort of were taught. And yeah, and then when I think like even more specifically about like what are the values then that the men and like the boys around me were taught growing up, I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind is like, that men are supposed to be, the leaders of families, the leaders within the church, and they take this really big leadership role within community. Um, which we'll get to later, probably on like what values we still hold from growing up, but a lot around that, like men and masculine people, like it was our role to sort of take care of the family, the whole like breadwinner situation, so it was like you're gonna grow up, you're gonna get a job, and then you're gonna be responsible for the larger family and making sure, we have everything we need. Yeah, and then I think also thinking about it from that masculine place of like, I think the value that was maybe not intended to be taught, but like it always seemed like the boys got to kind of go out and have more fun, and the women and girls usually were like staying at home and cooking or baking or doing those things, and the guys got to go out and like pursue hobbies like hunting and fishing and golf and things like that. So I think there was sort of an unspoken value around like the roles of women and femme folks, to sort of stay in and around the home, and then there was a little bit more freedom, I think, for the men and boys to kind of go and do what they wanted. So yeah, I guess that's what's coming up for me at this point, and I'll maybe shut up and let y'all chime in now too.
I gotcha. No, I keep thinking about this too from like a family standpoint, but I also think about like growing up as like being a former teacher, also like what I learned in school. And I was thinking about where I learned those like masculine, feminine roles that were so traditional. I felt like it was always at school. You would play with your friends. You always would be like, oh, well, the boys are going to go off and be like astronauts or space warriors, and then the girls would, I don't know, do those feminine roles. And there was always this dichotomy, and I don't know how it exists today, of just like boys and girls just like don't hang out until like they're older, and all that stuff is gross and cooties are real. But then it's like I think about it now as an adult again, which we'll get to later. But it's like most of my friends are female, and so it's always weird to like thinking about back to where I started. Just like that's just what you do. But I feel like that was the norm, school, societally, like separating those. Because at home, I would say um, I had a very strong mother who raised us in like honesty and responsibility. And thinking from where that kind of came from is looking at our larger family, is that my mom was one of, gosh, 6 kids, I think. Um, whatever the number, I don't know. I can't think of all my aunts and uncles right now, but very much just like kind of a split household of boys and girls growing up and doing these different roles and kind of having different responsibilities. So that when we were growing up, I remember Sunday was chore day, and I don't know, I had this innate sense that as soon as we got out of the car from church, I had to vacuum everything, and then I had to dust everything. And so that was just something instilled very early on, as like, I don't know, not necessarily like that live to serve mentality that kind of you were talking about, but just this whole idea of just like knowing your part within, I guess, the household. It did not teach me. I got paid $5 a week. It did not teach me how to financially plan, although that I think was kind of the gist. But just other things in terms of like organizing your time and being responsible. I think the other one, I don't know if I already said it too, is just like honesty. As a kid, you're always told like tell the truth. Um, and I'll touch on what honesty kind of means to me now, but I just remember as a kid, it's like you have to tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, you're a bad person, and kind of this black and white. Like if you tell the truth, then good things will come to you. If you don't tell the truth, then people won't like you. You get bad grades in school. Actually, think about it now, I feel like everything was always attached to grades. And again, maybe this is just being a former teacher or now working within the youth programming, where it's just like grades for some reason were always such a big deal that I I don't know. You're crafted as a people pleaser early on, because if you didn't get A's for some reason, then it's just like, oh, I'm not gonna become anything as I get older. And so I don't know, kind of these standardized ways to look at yourself if you're not truthful, if you're not responsible, whatnot.
Totally. I agree with both of you, and it's interesting when you think that, we all grow up with values, and some of the ones that you mentioned, but telling the truth about integrity, the importance of integrity, and being honest, with others around you. And at the same time, when you live in a society that everybody live with a mask because we all want to be perceived in a way that we think is going to make us look strong, specifically when we talk about masculinity. It sometimes it's hard, to continue living in these values when the society also don't allow you to be yourself. So that's why it's so important when we, talk about, about our values. Keep always those in mind, like integrity, respect. How you can be respectful to others when people don't respect you because of the color of your skin or where you come from, or because of your gender or whatever. So, society, it put us a lot of close a lot of doors on us that sometimes don't allow us to be yourself. But at the same way, how we can become better men, better individuals, if we're not grounded in these values, like empathy, open mindedness, being, being open to listen to new ideas, new perspectives, and feedback from others. So I think when I think in the values, and I think in my daughters that are my circles, those are the values that I want them to really go deep on them, and use them as, as your base in order to move to any space. Integrity, respect, empathy, open mindedness, curiosity is something else too. That appetite of learning, of being open to learn new things, and maybe for your culture, for you, there's something that's not normal, but at the same time you can see how positive it kind of good could be for you, for your mental state, for everything. But I think when we keep those in mind, and we can create that space at home where we can have these conversations, that your sons and daughters can also be aware that even when we have these values, the society out there can not allow us sometimes to do it, just to stay on, just to raise your voice, just to push others to break with those stereotypes and those things that society uh had created just to benefit a certain group. Obviously in this case we need to be realistic men, and how men also need to step up and stop being silent. Of course a lot of these things benefit us, but are we really want to keep living in this society when you meet someone you really don't know if that's the person that you're meeting, because we're all trying to portray or be someone else just to be accepted? I don't know. This is the kind of question that the more you think, the more deep you go, and you start to try to find an answer. And even when we know what we need to do to do that first step, it's challenging. And if it's challenging for me as an adult, just imagine the youth, that's growing up right now, that they believe they need to feel, they need to be put in in a specific box to be considered a whole person, or to be considered successful, just because because that's the society what is asking for you, but you're not living to your values. So yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm going in circles in these questions, but yeah, that's something a little bit of what I think.
It's it's a hard question, honestly. This is funny. This is very introspective of me. Honestly, with my mental health practitioner, my therapist, we've been talking about like values, because when you start something kind of like these different stages of your life, your values tend to change over time that you don't realize. And that was something that we were talking a lot about. So I left teaching December of last year after being in it for 8 years, and it was because this whole realization of, it's just like when I started as a teacher in 2015, it's like I just had this vision, this idea of like what it would look like, and just time changes you, and you grow up. And thinking about this question too is like, I feel like a lot of the values I was taught as a kid, I don't know if it's me growing up and trying to maintain those or get better at them somehow because I'm older, I know more. I think sometimes though, honestly, is because how I would see life experience is I spend a lot more time thinking more of like growing up, things that I saw that I didn't like. I kind of have the idea, the lens of like, what don't I want to be? The injustice or like the behaviors that you see, or like in times of toxic masculinity, racism, homophobia, transphobia, any of that stuff, where it's just like I feel like I have a lot easier time to say what I don't want to be. And it is tough for me as well to be like, oh, I know I want to be honest. I know I want to be responsible and respectful. I think in terms of like, but what does that look like? And so I don't know. That's kind of me, I guess, is you grow up and you see the people that you don't want to be, or you see the things where it's just like, well, I know that that's not right. It's almost that inherent sense because of these values that I had grown up. But no, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's a hard question.
And I would echo that too. I was just thinking, I mean, it's like these things are sort of baked into us when we're young, right? But then, like, how often do we actually like talk about this with our friends and with our people and just be like, what do you value most? I mean, it's like we don't spend a lot of time thinking about, as you said, Nick, those things that we want to be and we want to see in the world. It is a lot easier to be like, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to be like that person, which also makes me think of like the social justice movement sort of as a whole. Like we've kind of come from that place where it's like we're fighting against violence, we're fighting against racism and against all of these community level conditions. And at the same time, when we're asked, well, what is it we're fighting for? What do we want that future community to look like? What are the values that we hold together in the future? That is a lot harder, I think, for folks to dream about and imagine, because we're all just so busy surviving like the now, and trying to make it each day. And so, and I also had this thought of like, is people pleasing a value? Like, because so many of us are, Felix, as you said, like we learn how to put on a mask and we learn how to sort of fit into communities or like the spaces and places that we move in and through, like in our lives. But it's like, man, that seems like almost this negative value that we're all taught in how to present and express ourselves to the world. And then I think, well, dang, that sort of contradicts like what we shared about like honesty being a value and some of those things, and so I'm just like, my brain is getting a little existential too. But I think it's a good moment here to move into our next question too, because I think we're sort of traveling there anyways. But so reflecting on each of our own journeys, what values do you associate with being a man now, and how have these values evolved, shifted, or been influenced over time? Anyone want to start there?
Thank you, Sean and Nick, for sharing a little bit about yourselves. But when I think that traditionally some of these values, like I mentioned before, are associated with masculinity, it's very important to understand that they include, most of them include traits like strength, independence, and being competitive. That's what for men is what we consider being strong man or a successful man. So that also help us at work and other social aspects in life, relationship, personal development, or that's what we think. But however, societal norms and perception of masculinity have been evolving with the years. For example, the importance of emotional intelligence, something that maybe wasn't you know in focus in the past. Vulnerability, empathy, collaboration. I think in the past, I think a man was seen more like an individualistic person. So we couldn't ask for help. We were supposed to always be ready. Very individual journey, I believe. And obviously all those values like that, the ones that I mentioned, like the emotional intelligence, the vulnerability, empathy, etc. They were overlooked in the past. specifically in the traditional norms of masculinity. So when we think that in order to evolve, we need to change and maybe add some other values, as being authentic. I think those are the ones that it's going to help us battle those expectation and social norms that I talked in the past, you know, and be ourselves, don't be afraid and teach that to other people around us. That make us unique, that make us special. It's like we always talk about all the gifts and strength that all individuals have. They're needed, to support our communities. But the same way, we all have those traits and those, special abilities that make us unique. So we need to focus in those ones, in order to evolve and don't be stuck in that spot when we think that the society, the pressure that society put in us and don't allow us to even, show our values in a way that they're, honest. They make us and show us that we're human beings, and we live, we cry, we laugh, we do everything. Accountability are some of those that we need to, I think, in the past, if you, whatever you say, even the decision was wrong, you always stand up with your voice. That's what I said, that's even when you were wrong. So there's a lot of things that we need to change. And honesty, I think, is one of those. Supportiveness is another one. I think we all need to support each other. I think even for men, when we think we can hold everything and we're strong enough, in reality we're not. That's just that's drop in that cup of water till you get to a point that then you get all over it, because we got to a point that just because we didn't have ways to deal with our emotions and deal with what we're going through every single day, make things a little bit different. And always being open to to continue growing. I mean, we're human beings. We all want to be professional, we all have a role to play, but at the same time, we need to be open to learn. I think that's something that I'm super grateful when I think about myself and doing this work. I've been very privileged of having a lot of people like you guys, Nick, obviously, Sean and Ed, Pang. There's a Hunter. There's a lot of men that have been giving me that strength to continue doing this work, because it's really hard. Even when we have values as a man, you get to a point sometimes that you say, I don't know if I continue doing this. So I think that's where the values come to me and remind me of the importance of being ourselves, the importance to have integrity, to be respectful, to have empathy for others. I think that's the key, at least for myself, that helped me to do a better job every day, even when we know that some of these values are changing. But at the same time, we have the power to embrace those ones that we know that fit our communities, specifically with me, with the Latino community, and be, I have a better understanding of it. I mean, I think all these values reflect the more nuances, an inclusive understanding of masculinity, also embraces, qualities of traditional associated with femininity as well. Something that in the past men tried to stay away from anything that looked feminine. So let's embrace those. Let's don't look at them like they're, like you guys mentioned, some of them are for women. We believe we're for women, and other for men. No, I think we can do better, and I think this evolution will be important, for fostering healthier, and more fulfilling relationships, communities and societies. So.
Felix, thank you. That was well said. A lot to take away from that. If anyone watching or listening is wondering what's the most difficult part of doing this, it's like remembering your own answer, but then getting lost in one of these guys' wonderful things to say. It's like, oh my gosh. Um, one of the things, honestly, like actually that you were talking about, that how, and then maybe this is jumping to the how that's changed and evolved over time, is I even just thought about something within that answer that popped up for some reason, was like anytime a boy in school would wear pink, or like something about their attire was just like different, boys with earrings, anytime that happened, everyone just assumed, oh, that's such like feminine behavior. And they would just, it would be such a big deal. And now it's like anyone can look like whatever they want. And I think it's cool that we've gotten to that point where it's like I go to schools and people are themselves. And I think that's something that's, I don't know, the first thing I thought about. But my answer actually to this, I've been watching a lot of basketball lately. I'm not a March Madness person, but then I was because it was all over the news. Follow the Timberwolves, but you know what? When they sweep the Suns 4-0, I'm a big basketball fan. Um, but to me, it's just like even something about that where it's just like the masculinity is always there. Someone makes a nice dunk and they go, they show their muscles and kind of this whole idea of masculinity, like you said, Felix, being like strength. Um, to me, how it's kind of even evolved now, part of it, it's like thinking about like, okay, in basketball, I've been thinking about a lot this year because for the first time, I feel like in my 31-year-old lifetime is I saw women's basketball being like the most um, popular sport for the last like couple weeks because of Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and the WNBA draft and all that stuff. And it was just really cool to see kind of that shift changing where people aren't ex- people are expecting, I don't know how I'd say it. People are seeing female sports as like legitimate. And I think that was something as someone who grew up in sports being like, oh, dance isn't a sport. In Minnesota, it is now. Gymnastics. And it's like, I can't do a cartwheel. I can't do a somersault, guys. Stuff where it's just like, it's just evolving over time and we're accepting this new norm that I think is just so exciting. And I think the biggest thing that I think about it is as an ally within allyship is just that empathy, perspective building, and like support. Um, the first thing that like ESPN notified me after like the Indiana Fever drafted Caitlin Clark is like everyone's reaction to it and everyone was like super positive as opposed to like going on the feeds and people just like saying nasty things and being like disrespectful about it. It's just this idea and this overwhelming sense what's evolved over time is I think people are more supportive of each other. um there was someone at one of our schools the other day that was um, their attire was unique. What they were wearing was different. And one student like kind of called it out, be like, "Why are you dressed like that? What are you doing?" And then the very first thing is someone said, "She wants to," and that was it. And the conversation was over. I wasn't, my radars didn't go off to be like follow up, make sure no one's getting name called or bullied or anything. But like it was just cool to see like the evolution of what you look like. And obviously this happens all around the world, but it always gives me hope when I see it like on, especially this was on a playground where like it's very unstructured, rules aren't necessarily like the most important thing, to see kids supporting each other. And so that's something within myself that I always try to work as a role model, is taking like these ideas of like again empathy and support, and how we can do that. The last thing I'll say, and yes, it is also basketball related. On Tuesday, one of our after school programs is a basketball program. Yay. To me, it was so bonkers to see how much this boys group would listen to me after I made like one 3-pointer or like a fadeaway shot. And I'm not good at basketball. These shots weren't meant to go in, but they did. And all of a sudden these kids listened to me. And parts of it, the first thing I thought about was like, this is literally just like one of those maybe subtle ways that like toxic masculinity still exists, that these boys saw it as a strength. But knowing that maybe I couldn't erase that right away within the moment, I tried to take whatever platform I had to use it to be like, okay, they're looking at me now. Like, let's talk about how we can again support each other. Um, and just went through that, and like it was cool for kind of the first time to see this group of boys work together once they had that like support kind of role modeled. I don't know. I'm not trying to say that I changed their lives or anything because I think there was probably arguments after the next shot that happened after that, but it was just something where it's just like I really see support as like a value that to me is very important to me, and that empathy to make your support even stronger for one another.
That's some good stuff there, Nick. and I am not following any basketball stuff, and I can still connect with what you're sharing there. And I definitely would agree that I think, when I think about this question, I think I've spent a lot of time asking myself, what kind of a guy do I want to be? And sort of continuing to like self-evaluate and do this reflection along my journey in life. And I think, what comes up for me is how binary everything was. Like there were values, right, that men and boys were taught or used to be taught only, and then like the women and girls and feminine folks were taught these sort of other feminine values or ways of being in the world, and it made me think of the man box. For those who are familiar with that, that comes from Tony Porter out of A Call to Men. He wrote a whole book about it, and there's a cool YouTube video that's that's probably like 10-ish years old now. But like the whole premise of that was that, yeah, like society sets us up and puts us in these boxes. Men fall into one, and it's all of those values we've talked about, right? Strength and competition and success and individualism. And I feel like people used to reference like the Marlboro Man, which is probably definitely dating me and telling people how old I am. 37, I am up there. No. But yeah, just like that really like rugged man way of being and unfeeling and powerful and angry and, righteous anger. And I just think, with my own experience of being transgender and knowing so many people within the trans and gender expansive community, I think that has taught me and so much of our society too about like there are so many ways to be human in this world. It's not this or that. It's all of those things, right? It's like what we get to choose for ourselves as like our individual values. What are those things that matter to us? And it doesn't matter if it sort of falls in a man or woman box. It's like, no, all of these things we've talked about are human values. And so I think that's one thing that for me personally, like reflecting on, even 10 years ago, the man I was then versus now, I think a lot of the values that women and girls were taught and exhibit, like around nurturing and compassion and kindness and just care, like being sort of these caregivers within communities. I find myself what's that word? I can't think of the word, but like moving to that more and more, because I think, like you said, Nick, like there's so much to be said for having compassion and empathy with our buddies, with our guy friends, and with all people in the world, including like when I think about the dad that I want to be to my kid. I want to be that nurturing, loving, kind, warm, affectionate dad, and that wasn't how my dad was years ago, when I was growing up. And not to like say anything bad about him or the generations, but I think, Felix, you really named it. Like this evolution is happening and we're constantly growing and learning new ways, or I don't know if better is the right word, but for me it feels better to continually sort of evaluate and, continue to think about how can I be the best version of myself, someone who's not causing harm everywhere I go and who's considering how other people feel and how they're showing up where I'm, in spaces. And then I think lastly, the thing I was thinking about is this sort of, servant heart, like helping others. I think when I was growing up, how I learned to do that was like to give all of yourself, to completely go, until you have nothing left in the tank. And that's what we're expected to do, is to like constantly be caring and helping for others. And I think how my views have shifted on that is like, but there's also this piece around we have to care for ourselves. We have to sort of find a balance between how can we continue to have that sort of servant heart or helper heart or whatever you want to call it, while also continuing to take care of ourselves, because I think that's something I've learned in the last couple of years, especially for those of us who do this type of work within violence prevention, within any other type of social justice related movement. The idea that so many of us are just constantly burning out because there's so much, and we see all of the harm and the violence, and we're just, we feel that need to pour everything out of ourselves to help these other folks. And this new way that I'm learning is like, actually, if I take the time to care for myself, and I'm drinking water and I'm getting rest and I'm, doing those things to take care of myself, I'm that much more able to like give more of myself to people in ways that I think is a lot more generative than if I was just like constantly still going on this like burnout train track that a lot of us kind of get stuck on. And I think that that's a huge lesson that I didn't come up with, but people in the movement who have noticed these things, and like, how are we caring for our community without like completely burning ourselves out, to where then we have to exit community, or we like disconnect or isolate from community because we just can't do it anymore. And so I think that value of like serving while also like trying to find a balance of like, we have to be also taking care of ourselves. And I think for men, I think in this patriarchal world, like there is such an emphasis on men feeling good and getting the things they want, and there is sort of that self-gratification built in. But I'm thinking more of the ways of like just like whole body wellness, like rest. And like I think about Peng Tao, who was a big part of this network, and really started the network, the Men and Masculine Folks Network, and started these kitchen table conversations. And he would always like want me to send out these care packages to the guys who are part of the network, and he always wanted me to like include face masks and like bath bombs and like chocolates, like, and things like this that I think, you'd normally think, oh, that's going to go in a basket to some lady or some chick. And it's like, no, we all need to actually be able to take care of our bodies, our minds, our emotions, and sort of that wholeness that we each have. And so I've learned a lot about that.
Thank you, Sean. You're preaching. So thank you for that. And Nick, I don't know how you do it. If you need to get a 3-pointer in order to get the youth to listen to you, I wouldn't be able to do that. I think my groups will be a mess. I don't know how you can do that, but I'm glad you're doing it. You're doing it in a very thoughtful way. So thank you for what you do for what you do. Sorry. So in order to continue, as you some of you guys know, at MAP and within the Men and Masculine Folks, we're always thinking about the importance of increasing community connectedness in order to build safer and more resilient, thriving communities. So the next question will be this one: thinking about your community, what are some of the positive values that are held collectively that uplift the well-being of all? So, really quick, think about your community and what are some of those positive values that are held collectively that uplift the well-being of all. Put it there.
Yeah, I got an answer kind of for that. Not super duper long, but I think something that I really appreciate about the Duluth community and learning and being a part of it is just the growth and the value for growth. To some people, that's all about like taxes and fixing the roads, but then just in general, just like how much space there is for people to kind of start things up, move into spaces that communities within this community are like looking for. And I just feel like in the Duluth Twin Ports area, there's always more voices that say it might not be easy, but we can try it, sort of an attitude. Whereas other places I've been in, It's usually like a hard no, or the idea of like, why even bother? I feel like in Duluth and um, the surrounding area is just a lot of like, yeah, we can try that. Not a bad idea.
I like that. Yeah, when I think about community, I think about our trans and queer community here locally that I'm really just deeply invested in and connected with. And I think, and I say this a lot too, but I think there's a value around like deep care for one another. And I think that comes from a place of like we understand that historically and currently presently our members of our community are facing oppression and harm and violence and sexual assault and all of these hard things, and so there's this deep, I think we're committed to a value of like taking care of one another and like being the ones who offer support and resources because again, historically, like the services, the nonprofits, the systems out there, they aren't really designed and they don't work very well for queer and trans folks. And so we don't have a lot of trust in those systems. For example, if someone is assaulted, their first thought is not to call 911 or to go to the police. It's to like reach out to someone that they're, part of their chosen family, or maybe some organization like Trans Northland to get that support from people within our own community. And I always think about, and I never remember where it comes from, but this phrase, not for me, but this phrase of like, we take care of us. I think that is just deeply like ingrained within our community here and within trans and queer communities all over the world. And a lot of other communities as well. It's not just ours. These values are shared, I think, across communities, but that's the one that came up for me right away.
Thank you, Sean and Nick. For me, when I think about my community, I think the Latino community is very rich in cultural values that contribute to the well-being, or at least they're created that way. Just because it's a community that been harmed a lot, that been going through a lot of struggles, and that's why it's important to have a this understanding of the values that uplift and the or well-being of individuals. And when I think in some of those are like family, for example, family plays a crucial central role in the Latino culture because provide that emotional support, that guidance, and the sense of belonging, attached to the respect, obviously. I mean, respect for elders, respect for authority figures, and others in the community. They're highly valued, obviously. That may be showing courtesy, consideration, and the difference, between each other, and even keeping in consideration the social status. That's something that costs also. You can see some people taking advantage of that. Also the emphasis, the importance of standing together. I think when I think on that, I think in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico went through, a really, really tough time. No electricity, no water for months. So that was a time where, as a whole, as a community, most Puerto Ricans got together and start sharing food, sharing, resources that they have available, and that show you that when we work in community, we can go through everything. We can be more resilient. We can have a better support system that provide that strength to that community to keep being strong. But we all need to be grounded in this. Also, something that, like Sean mentioned before, faith. I mean, a lot of many Latino have strong religious and spiritual faith that provide them comfort, and support and connection that is important for them. Also, when I think in faith and and hope, and that esperanza, how we call it in Spanish, it's for me, it make me doubt sometimes a little bit, just because I'm Catholic. I believe in God. For me, that's something that's very important to me. But when I talk to newer generations, a lot of them they have lost that sense of faith. They don't see that connection, and that could be to many factors. Those cases from church of abuse and things like that. That it should open the door for us to have deeper conversations about that, and also make them accountable. I mean, we're all human beings, but I think those individuals are causing harm, they need to be valued, that they need to pay for the harm that they're doing to others. It's not like we're gonna leave them, okay, you're a human being, you deserve a second opportunity. I know we all deserve a second opportunity, but there's some cases that these individuals, unfortunately, they need to be put it away depending on the harm that they're causing in their community. And I think these values that we're all talking help us as that guide, to be better individuals, better brothers, better sisters, better husbands, better uncles, better grandparents, but be better everything. And that help us do better. And something that I'm very proud of the Latino community is how hard they work. I hear all the time how they want them to take them away. You guys are illegal, that's how they call them. They don't use undocumented, they use illegal, just because they know that word is harmful for the Latino community. And how you could be illegal in a stolen land. That's what we always say. And it causes a lot of harm, specifically because most of us, when we ask about background, everybody, oh no, I'm Irish, I'm German, and for those kind of things, they're very proud. But to cause harm and call people, illegal is another thing. But that's the importance of keeping those values just concentrated in our strengths, and uplift the well-being of all those individuals within the Latino community and all communities. Even that I'm talking about community, I'm totally sure some of these harms happen to a lot of other communities, specifically to the BIPOC community, if we're gonna talk specifically. But also contribute to the strength. That's something that's very needed and important, that resilience, that all communities need to be vibrant, and to all these cultures to feel like as a whole. So yeah, I think there's a lot of those values that they're super important to my community. Like I said, family, respect, solidarity, faith are some of many, or communities, one of them, that work hard. It could be another of those values that Latino have, that make a difference, out there. And be optimistic. Absolutely. I think that's something that we need to be optimistic in order to go through all the challenges that life throw at us. Something that sometimes is even hard to be optimistic when life is sometimes so hard and so difficult. But I think if we can keep those values together, and we can look life and emphasize our lives in hope, and resilience, we can create a brighter and better future for all communities and for everyone. A world free of violence and free of harm, of where everyone can be the best version of themselves, and we can all thrive and be the best version of ourselves. So yeah.
I love that piece around hope too, like holding on to hope, because we all see the harm and the violence out there, and it's like I don't know about y'all. Well, I probably do, but like if I could snap my fingers and stop all of this harm and change systems, like I think every single one of us would in sync, you know, snap to it, pun intended. But I appreciate thinking about thinking about these, these positive values, and then on the flip side, I'm curious, and I know we're coming up to time here, but I think that there also are values within our communities that cause harm. And so, our sort of final question of today's conversation is, what are some of those values that our communities may need to let go of in order to thrive? And the thing that comes to mind for me, again, thinking about our LGBTQ plus community, and I think there's reasons for this that are outside of our control, but what I see a lot of is competition against one another within our communities. And that comes from a place of we have systems that are supposed to be helping all of us, and they give us crumbs and bits and pieces of what we all really need, and then we're fighting one another for those crumbs. And I see a lot of that and have seen that over the years. And so it's like, how can we, I think that there's something good within competition, right? Like, I think there's something like within this like idea of striving to be better, working hard to build skills and that sort of a thing. And then also when we're fighting one another, and pushing each other down to like get up that ladder, sort of just falling right into how this society is currently set up, like that is so harmful, and it's so sad to see, especially when, again, like when I think of our community as a whole, I think of it as being so vibrant and beautiful and colorful, and we are super talented and create joy where there isn't a lot of joy. And so for me, I think that would be a big one. Somehow, if we could sort of, I don't know, evolve that sense of competition against one another to be like actually pushing one another to do better rather than pushing each other down so we can have more opportunities, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it's that idea of support, Sean, that I think is super important. That competition just those that divide and everyone's on a team. And it's like, well, we could also all work together. Um, yeah, this one, thinking about it, it's like it's always easy, like, oh, if I could set my fingers and change anything or like decide that society, let's go with one thing, like I could write that list forever, but one that I really honed in on, kind of going in tandem with this idea of growth, is and here I'll preface this by saying I collect vinyl records now. I eat Waffle Crisp cereal, which I don't know if that was a 90s thing, or like I like Surge Pop. It's delicious. It's great. But I think the value that stood out to me, like one that we can let go, is kind of like nostalgia. And maybe not nostalgia, it's like, oh, the happy memories or like cultural traditions and stuff like that. But nostalgia that um, prevents open mindedness. We can't do this because we've always done it this way. Nostalgia, and that's the idea that, well, that's just the way that things have always been done. I think that was always tough for me sometimes in schools, is that because those institutions have been around forever, like pedagogy, the way that people teach has been pretty consistent since schools have existed. Um, just even if school districts themselves have been around a lot longer than any of us have like been alive, and so the way that their mission statement and their school policies are pretty like, I don't know, like structured and secure in what they want things to be. And I feel like anytime that I would always like bring up like, oh, this is like what the students need, or like advocating for meeting our communities like where they're at, it's always just I just always felt like I was met with like, well, that's a great idea, but we just have always done it this way, or so and so has always been in charge of that, or we don't do that here for X, Y, and Z reasons. And to me, it always, I don't know, maybe nostalgia isn't the best choice of word for it, but this idea that because of the past, we can't change the future. And it's so frustrating, especially with like creative idea makers that we have in this chat, that we have map building right now, even, and just like the community that I talk about that is so full of growth. Right now in Duluth, they have Homegrown, which has been going since Sunday and will end on Sunday, of bands that I've never heard before. Shout out to Dirt Bike Boyfriend, which I thought was a really cool band name, but it's just like somewhere in that band's life, no one said, well, you shouldn't do that band name because there's a better, I don't know. Just these ideas were creativity blossoms, but it everyone can adhere and can show off their talents, get to their true potential, when we're not so stuck in this is the way things have always been done, and really embracing open mindedness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when I think about those values that community need to let go, we need to also let people know that all communities have their strengths. Obviously, even when you don't think you have strengths, you do, and they'll be needed in order to put away or let go some of those values, cultural values that exist in our communities, and reevaluate some of those values. And when I think in my community, I think the ones that you guys mentioned, also the materialism. I think people are emphasizing material things and possessions that don't allow us to be ourselves, that maybe are showing an indication of success when in realistic they're not. So it's interesting to think about it, because I saw that in my previous work when I used to work as a financial advisor. A lot of people that I knew, that I know, that they look very successful, and then when it's to sit with you to help them deal with some financial difficulties, and hardships, you could see that they weren't living that life, that they're trying to show. The colorism, also is another one. The preference for lighter skin, or seeing like something that lighter skin to be better or more value when it's not, or oppose darker skin. That machismo, a word that Latinos don't like to use, because just because it's a Spanish word, it's mostly think people think in Latinos right away, but obviously are characterized, for example, for the dominance, control, and suppression of emotions, things that are in that men box that a lot of men utilize to feel strong. So yeah, those are some of the ones that I think we need to let it go in order to be in that place, that a community, in order to thrive, to be more successful, and to create change. That change is needed to be in the place that we go. But just because of a matter of time, I want to thank Nick and Sean for being here, for this great conversation. And I also want to thank all of you who were able to join us, that also can remember that they can go to YouTube or go to Spotify and look for those old recordings. And as a reminder, we're holding these conversations every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Time. Join us for our next live conversation on Thursday, May 16th at 12 p.m. Central Time, where we'll be talking about the practical ways that men and masculine folks can start using the values that are important to us as individuals, as well as within our communities, to create positive change.
Yes, looking forward to that one. I think that'll be a challenging one for me personally, but it'll be good because we'll grow. We'll
It's the point
learn.
of these conversations. We're growing, we're learning,
That's right.
thinking
We're
about it.
pushing our comfort levels a little bit here. I like that. So, anyways,
Absolutely, and
don't forget.
also families to listen and create this, have the conversation in their own space. It is important to listen to us while we're even talking. Use the chat sometimes, even to make comments or just to share, answer the question for us. We'll be more than happy to share it here in our space. So
That's right. Yes. So, as Felix mentioned, don't forget you can follow us on the social medias to stay connected with the Men and Masculine Folks Network, as well as Men as Peacemakers. You can like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also find us on Spotify or Podbean and listen to some of our past conversations. And if you happen to be watching this conversation as a part of your virtual training for the Don't Buy It project, you can check out the description below for the instructions on downloading the discussion and activity guide. And as we said, we encourage you to have a conversation like this with the people in your life. It's not that hard. It's a little bit scary, but we do it and we support one another as we're learning and growing together. So, again, thanks for joining us here at the kitchen table, and together we are building interconnected communities that are free from violence, where we all can thrive. See y'all next time.